NHL free agent frenzy continues with signings announced today in Philadelphia and Montreal and San Jose, including Philip Zadina going to the Sharks. Plus, we have some other news from around the league, including the arbitration dates announced for all the remaining RFAs that have elected arbitration to settle their contracts. We have more news out of Detroit and Ottawa, both after the fallout of the Alex Debrincat trade. More organizational changes coming due to the ownership change in Ottawa as well, and several other news and notes around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover here today, including a few signings as NHL free agent frenzy continues, although it is really starting to quiet down here a bit. There's still a handful of interesting UFAs out there and lots of RFAs, but the RFA deals usually don't get done right away. The UFA stuff is always a little bit more time sensitive, so usually the RFA deals trickle in throughout the summer. But for today, we have 3 signings. So one I think we may have talked about before. It was only announced today by the Montreal Canadiens, but I'm pretty sure NHL insiders had this report before, and I may have mentioned it, but I'm just going to cover it just on the odd chance that we did not. But the Montreal Canadiens today announced that they've signed forward Mitchell Stevens. He gets a 1-year, 2-way deal. It's a very lucrative American Hockey League contract, so he gets league minimum $775 at the NHL level and $300,000 at the ECHL level. For the most part, I'd say Stevens is a signing that's designed to help the team in Laval in the American Hockey League, and somebody who has a bit of experience should they require, a call-up, especially for somebody in the bottom 6. So not a bad signing there. The Philadelphia Flyers came to terms today with one of their RFAs as well, signing forward Noah Cates. He gets a 2-year deal at $2.625. So that's, I think, a pretty reasonable contract extension for him, who had certainly a bit of a breakout season last year. It was a nice story in Philly as one of the players who took a step forward with his career and solidified himself. So to me, I like that contract for Philly. We'll see what else he can do to continue to build on that for the next couple of years. And then the San Jose Sharks today, they've announced they've signed UFA Philip Zadina, who was recently terminated by the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, that was a mutually agreed termination between the player and the team, which essentially he was wanting to first start. He didn't get it. He wanted to be traded, but Eiserman tried, couldn't make it happen apparently, mainly because of his contract. He had 2 years remaining at $1.8 million, and then they put him through waivers. Nobody picked him up. So then they put him through waivers yet again a few days later, and for unconditional waivers for the purpose of termination. And of course, it wasn't picked up, which is no big surprise. And now he signs a 1-year deal in San Jose at $1.1 million. Now, even though he was a UFA here now, he is still going to be an RFA at expiry. So he still hasn't accumulated enough NHL experience to become an unrestricted free agent under normal circumstances. So therefore, he'll go back to being a restricted free agent at the end of the contract. So $1.1 million, 1 year. This is a low-risk, potentially high-reward scenario for the Sharks. We know the Sharks are kind of, I don't know if we want to call them retooling. They're rebuilding. I mean, they're more of a retool, I think. Maybe they go into a deeper retool if they end up moving Erik Karlsson and Logan Couture. But for right now, it's kind of like a change of leadership, change of culture almost. But there's still a lot of things in progress here that we don't know. Either way, Zadina should be able to get a more offensive role, I think, with San Jose. It's a contract that's not long-term, so they're not, putting themselves at risk. $1.1 million can be fully buried in the American Hockey League if things don't work out and he has to go on waivers. So at the end of the day here, this is a low-risk, high-reward scenario. Zadina's betting on himself. He left over $4 million, I think it was closer to $4.5 million in actual cash on the table in Detroit to walk away and become an unrestricted free agent. He's only getting $1.1 million of that back. So hopefully for his sake, he needs to extend his career by at least a few more years to get that money back to at least break even here. So certainly I think it's fair to say he's going to be extremely motivated to prove himself, hopefully get some different coaching, different line mates, and find the game that he had so much success with before he got to the NHL. Because he did have a lot of NHL scouts ready to take him at a high pick. I mean, he had a lot of success with the Halifax Mooseheads in his draft year. Of course, before that, played in Europe. And, it was a great-looking prospect. It was a, top 3 to 4 pick and ended up slipping down a few spots to Detroit, and it just didn't work out. So hopefully it does in San Jose. Now, the Vegas Golden Knights, we know they're a team that likes to make history. Well, they've become a team that do something for the first time in 2 different ways, which we kind of talked about here before, but at the same time, this is like kind of becoming a thing with them. Like they like to be the trendsetters here. But they're the first team to have the cup fully engraved before players all get their day with the cup. Because we know what once NHL teams win the cup, every player and executive has a chance to have their day with the cup, so they can have their own little, local party, celebration, whatever they want to do. They get it for a day or so. And I do think in some scenarios, some more higher profile players do get it for more than a day from the stories I've heard. But either way, they typically don't engrave the cup until it's all done, until like the end of this, end of the summer when the cup's made its round. So they're doing that. They'd already had it done. It's already started to make its rounds. I know Nick Waugh was, I believe, the first one in Quebec to have his first day, or his day with the cup. I'm not sure what's coming next. We'll see. You can follow along on social media. The keeper of the cup, Philip Pritchard, posts a lot of stuff on his social media in case you didn't know that. And they're also the first team to have 4 goalies included in the names that they're engraving on the cup as part of their roster. Of course, we know they had a lot of goalies because of injuries this year, but certainly Eden Hill and Jonathan Quick were your tandem to close things up. Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit also had their fair share of being involved throughout the year as well to help get them there, and obviously saw some time in the playoffs too. So clearly all 4 of them deserve to be there. Quick probably played the least out of all of them, I think, but either way, he was on the bench for the playoffs for a big chunk of it. So at the end of the day, the Golden Knights won the way they did. It's not the conventional way, but at the end of the day, that does not matter at all. It matters that they did indeed win. Now, as I mentioned, we got the announcement today from the NHLPA with the arbitration dates. So now you can follow along, depending on who your favorite team is or what players you're most interested in, when their dates are set for. So typically, and some of these players that have dates on this list have already settled. Like I mentioned before, I do this every year when we get to this time of season where you get arbitration. For some people, if you're not familiar with it, or if you haven't had a favorite player or a young player on your team go through it, then it's can be a scary thing, and maybe not everybody understands it. But a high chunk of these cases, over 90% of them, don't end up getting to the point that they go to arbitration. They settle beforehand, which is good. There was 2 cases this year of club-elected salary arbitration, which was going to be Timo Meier and Alex Debrincat, both the Devils and Senators. Before the trade, we're going to go that route should they need to. And of course, both deals of them are settled, so there won't be any team-elected salary arbitration dates this year. But for players, the first date is July 20th, which is Philip Kurashev, Brandon Duhaime, Torpchenko in St. Louis, and then Cates, who we just talked about, who just signed. So he would have been on the 20th, but he's done. The 21st is Samsonov in Toronto, so that's a key one to watch for any moves the Leafs might make. The 24th has Brett Howden in Vegas, Vince Dunn in Seattle, and Tanner Jeannot in Tampa. The 26th has Ian Mitchell and Will Borgen, but Borgen's already signed. The 27th will be Ross Colton with the Avalanche. 28th will be Velarde, who's now in Winnipeg. And Cale Fleury was supposed to be that day, but of course he signed as well. On the 30th, we've got Jeremy Swayman and Jack McBain. On the 31st would have been Debrincat, but that's no longer needed. The 1st of August is Trent Frederick in Boston. August the 2nd is Morgan Barron and Troy Terry. And on August the 4th, that'll be the end of it. You get Ryan McLeod, Brandon Scanlon, and Drew O'Connor. So there we have it. So we can start checking names off this list between now and these dates roll up. A lot of times, not all cases, some of them are done well ahead. But I find when you're leading into crunch time, 24 to 48 hours ahead of these dates is when a lot of these players and teams kind of say, okay, let's settle this and then get something done. So those are all your dates. If you're paying attention to know certain key times when you might finally find out on one of your favorite restricted free agents contract situations. Now, some other news around the NHL as well today. John Paddock, longtime coach and GM when it comes to junior hockey and the NHL. Most recently spent the past 9 years with the Regina Pats of the Western Hockey League, of course, which was the home of Connor Bedard throughout his entire junior career, has announced today that he is retiring. The team is replacing him, of course, but after 39 years in hockey, with a lot of that spent in junior and the NHL, except the past 9 years being the head coach and general manager of the Regina Pats. It's a well-deserved retirement. John Paddock has done a lot for the game of hockey, like I said, at both levels, and certainly want to wish him the best in retirement. The Vancouver Canucks today announced that they've signed a new affiliation for the East Coast League. Their new East Coast League affiliate will now be the Kalamazoo Wings. So that's a new situation set up for them. So, of course, they'll have Vancouver, Abbotsford, and then Kalamazoo. And speaking of the East Coast League, they're going to be also getting an expansion franchise starting next year in the 24-25 season. This is almost like a, Field of Dreams, the old movie, the old baseball movie, the build it and they will come type of moment. Lake Tahoe is getting a expansion franchise, so which is not something you might have expected before. But of course, the NHL hosted the outdoor game there before, and obviously it's kind of created a bit of a talk in the area, and certainly a desire to get something more at the higher levels of hockey. So certainly Lake Tahoe will be an East Coast Hockey League expansion franchise, and possible for an NHL affiliate starting next year. So that's certainly a cool scenario to see a place like that start to work its way up into the pro game of hockey. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we have some fallout, if you will, from the Debrincat trade between Detroit and Ottawa. We'll start with Debrincat himself. Of course, Steve Yzerman and Alex Debrincat did media today virtually, where they both spoke to the media. And like I said in the reaction or analysis video last night on the Debrincat trade, to me, with what we had heard even last night before he spoke to the media, it was pretty clear to me that Alex Debrincat never had any intention of signing and staying in Ottawa beyond the 1 year. I guess if he would have been in a situation where he had to, he would have signed this year for the 1 year to get the free agency, and that would have been it. But he never, since the day he was traded to Ottawa, had any intention of signing a long-term deal. That was my interpretation of it. And based on what he said to the media today, I think it's fair to say that I was right. And anybody who thought that, you're right on the money. So essentially, Debrincat said that we spent a year there, and we just didn't really have enough time to think about signing long-term. That, to me, doesn't make any sense. Like, you spent a year there where you didn't have time to think about it. I honestly think he would have been happy possibly to stay in Chicago. I think he liked the setup there. He was used to it. He was drafted there. They had some roots. He and his wife had just had a young child who was only a few months old, and that got ripped away from him, and he got treated when he really didn't want to be. And I think he would have liked to have stayed. So I think after going to Ottawa, which is a new country for him, being an American-born player, so obviously he'd never played outside of the U.S. For, at least besides being the visitor. Big deal. Just had a new baby, so of course you want to be close to family. It's easier to get help, on that types of thing, and just to be close for visiting purposes and all that. So I just think that it just was a scenario where I think that's the Pierre Dorion should have had more of that factored in, and should have asked to speak to the agent or the player about that scenario before the trade. I know a lot of people are giving Pierre Dorion crap for the return that he got for Debrincat. I honestly don't mind the return. I think they did well. Pierre Dorion and the Senators had no leverage. Debrincat was an RFA, yes, but he's only going to be traded to where he's going to sign a contract. So as much as they don't have trade protection, they can kind of dictate to where they want to go, because if they won't sign, the other team is not going to pull the trigger. It's just that simple. So in my opinion, a year ago, Dorion should have had a little bit more homework done to make sure that that was going to be the case. So they could have kept him long term. But as far as what he did now to move on from it and try to recoup as best he could, I think he did all right. He got a first-round pick. They gave up a first-rounder. They got a first-rounder. Now, this one might be a little lower, but that's not necessarily going to be a worse player. You just never know. It depends on how a pick is used. You got a fourth. You also give up a second and a third. You get a fourth instead. But on top of that, you get a prospect who's easily worth at least a third. And then you get Dominik Kubalik, who's a fairly consistent 20-goal guy, scored 30 before, good one-timer, can play a similar, he's not Alex Debrincat, but he can play a similar type of role. So, really, if you think about it, Debrincat had 27 goals last year, Kubalik had 20, that's only 7 difference. Yes, Debrincat has a history of being more, but so does Kubalik. Like, you just never know. This could work out for Ottawa to Kubalik, maybe it doesn't. It doesn't matter. But would you have traded a second-round pick for a 20-goal guy who's hit 30 before? I wouldn't rule that out. I think he did well. But the fact is, if you're going to put anything on Dorion and say he should have done something better, it would have been doing more homework last year at the draft to make sure that there was interest to sign at the very least, if not, getting it done then, to pull the trigger on the trade or go in a different direction at that point. That way you're not trying to find the chemistry with this new player, hope he stays, and then now you get to start over again. So you're setting the team back in a sense, because it does take time to build chemistry, but it is what it is. We'll see what happens. But when it comes to the Senators, there were some other announcements today to organizational changes I wanted to cover here as well, all of which appear to be positive, but there are some good people that have left the organization, but it's all related to the sale. There's nobody leaving on bad terms, no real big surprises here. But the Senators today did confirm, or at least through the reporter Bruce Garriock, confirmed that Anthony LeBlanc, who was the president of business operations, at one point he was part owner of the Arizona Coyotes years back. He has resigned with the club over the weekend. There was believed to be Michael Andlauer was the new owner, even though it's not closed and is not officially the owner. He was in town a lot, and I think he might still be spending a lot of time around the team. It's believed that he was in the offices last week around the Sens and met with a lot of the staff. And there's some belief that maybe he would have let LeBlanc know that he was likely going to be replaced. That might not be until September, but you know what? If that's the point, if you see the writing on the wall, ownership's going to make a change. Why not go now? Have some time. And apparently his wife still lives in Arizona. Like his wife is based in Arizona, I guess, for whatever she does. So it gives him a chance to kind of take a little bit of time and decide what's next for him, where he's going to be going. But I mean, he's been a long time Ottawa native and citizen. So we'll see where that goes for him. But ultimately, I don't blame him for leaving. If he knew he was going to be replaced as soon as the sale was officially closed anyway, then why not have some extra time off to do that now? He even confirmed with the reporter that he was leaving on good terms. There's no bad blood, no ill will or anything like that. All of these people are going to be replaced, and it's just part of business when ownership changes like that. Michael Andlauer was also seen watching and taking in a fair bit of the Senators development camp and seen talking to Pierre Dorian off and on during that whole process here as well. And we also learned that their director of marketing as well also ended up leaving the organization last week. So that was Tom Loof. He's also out. So there have a few spots there to fill. Now, there's also some speculation within this latest article from Bruce Garriock confirming that there's some whispers that we might be seeing the return of Cy Leader back to the organization. Now, Cy Leader, in case you don't know, was one of the, I guess you can call him like a founding father of the Ottawa Senators. He, along with Bruce Firestone and Randy Sexton, were the ones who were able to get the franchise off the ground in the first place, and he was a longtime Senators employee from 92 to 2017. When a large part of that was the president of business operations, which is what Anthony LeBlanc was doing. Now, of course, he ended up having I guess you could say a strained relationship with Eugene Melnyk, and ended up Case Melnyk let him go back in 2017. Of course, he's an executive, I believe, in the car automotive industry now, but he's rumored to be coming back. So we'll see. That would be a great return. Obviously, he knows the city very well. He was involved with the LeBreton Flats bidding the first time around back a number of years ago when he was still there. So he certainly has a lot of experience when it comes to that, and it would be a tremendous asset to the organization, especially in terms of helping it continue to reconnect with the fan base. I think LeBlanc did a really good job in that regard. He was able to help with season ticket sales and helping the organization to reconnect with and kind of reestablish a better relationship with its fans. I think he played a good role and did some good work there. So in that sense, it's sad to see him go, because I think he was good at his job. But at the same time, Cy Leader, the idea of him coming back is quite appealing as well, because of all the great work that he did before. And like I said, he knows the community better than just about anybody. He would be a tremendous asset. And he was also an advisor to Michael Andlauer during the bidding process to purchase the Senators. So it's not a huge shock that he'd be involved in the organization in some capacity once everything is closed and said and done. And this article also confirms again that Michael Andlauer is hoping to have Daniel Alfredsson, the franchise's greatest player, and former captain for a long time, return to their organization, and hoping that he can take on some sort of meaningful role in the hockey operations department, possibly in player development or advisor type of position. Hard to say. It could be an advisor to the GM and also work in player development. Could be a variety of things, but we'll see. I think long term, I think it's possible, maybe not right away, but I think down the road, I think Alfredsson could possibly be a president of hockey ops candidate. And it wouldn't even be shocking at some point, whenever they go through a coaching change, if he might even get involved there, because he did mention in the interviews in the past year or so that since he's been away from working with the Senators, that he got into coaching with his kids and that he really loved it. Now, of course, he'd be a case like Marty St. Louis that only had previous coaching experience playing doing AAA coaching at 11, 13-year-olds. It's not like he's got anything really relevant in that regard, but if Marty St. Louis can do it, who's to say Daniel Alfredsson couldn't do it? Same sort of scenario. So we'll see where that goes, but it'd be awesome to see him get involved here as well. But that's all your news here for today. Lots more to come. There'll be another video likely later today. Still lots of speculation around lots of players or where they might sign. Some trades still being worked on. So we'll be back with all that stuff later on tonight. Thanks very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. And I'll catch you next time.